them. Anna's just going to give us a little snapshot or overview of how she came to write this book, or some of the story behind the book. So Anne, I'll hand over to you if you want to.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Christine. I'm speaking from the land of the Gadigal people, and I too pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. The Gift of Adoption is my first book, and writing it gave me a new perspective about a lot of things. I found that the combination of hindsight and lived experience are great tools for distilling clarity not previously possible. The book describes our journey to parenthood, from the death of our first child, the subsequent miscarriages and unsuccessful IVF attempts, to our adoption of siblings from the Philippines. Marvin was almost 5 and Maravik had just turned 7. So I'm going to add a few photos to set the scene. So if I've got to share. Christine, you might tell me if you're up on, you've got the photos?
Yeah, you're there.
Perfect. Adopting children internationally, particularly older children, is rarely the instant happily ever after story imagined by many and promoted by celebrities. All adoption stories are different, and many years of hard work go into building a happy family. Our story started when we received a phone call from Docs informing us of the allocation of the children. And I can tell you, after 10 years, it was hard to believe that we were finally going to be parents. We worked very hard to be prepared through all that was required by Docs, including parenting seminars and extensive reading. And we were experienced teachers used to managing children and difficult behaviour, and in some of the toughest schools in Sydney. So we were pretty confident. Excitement made it easy to imagine an outcome through rose-coloured glasses and to lose sight of the significance of the challenges that lay ahead and the disruptions that we were introducing into the children's lives. It's not that we didn't think about it. We did a lot. It was more a case of not understanding what the real challenges would be or the enormity of them. None of our preparation addressed the reality of bringing a 5 and a 7-year-old from a different culture into our life or the ongoing issues they would face. Our connection with Marvin and Maravik began when we received these 2 small images. I can tell you that I spent a lot of time looking into their faces. Too much time when I was at work, I suppose, trying to imagine who they were. But we had to wait 4 months to meet them. Our first day together brought us crashing back to earth. Meeting them at the orphanage was an emotional moment. But we were given very little time to think or ask our list of questions. But as a cold drink, told us a few basic facts about their daily routine, and then ushered the 4 of us out the door. It's only about half an hour after we'd arrived. I think about this moment a lot because I can't imagine how terrifying it must have been for the children. We didn't even speak the same language. We returned to our hotel, took them for a swim, which was a big success. But within minutes of returning to the apartment, Marvin launched into his first tantrum. It came out of nowhere. He just started screaming and throwing boxes of Lego and books around the room. He moved on to anything that he could move, including heavy wooden bar stools and dining chairs. And he threw them over and over again with a strength that was beyond belief. Anything that wasn't tied down became a projectile. Even the dining room table ended up on its side. And if you look at how little he is, that dining room table was very heavy. This destruction continued for 2.5 hours before he dropped to the floor and started sobbing and screaming hysterically. And the screams lasted for another hour until he fell asleep, curled up in the corner of the lounge. It's fair to say that our week in Manila was tough. Marvin had 2 or 3 tantrums every day. And on day 3, Maravik's tantrums started. Excursions outside the apartment triggered meltdowns, so we hunkered down for the week, taking it in turns to go out for supplies. It was a relief when we got back to Sydney, but life didn't get any easier, and tantrums were part of every day. They were scared and they were angry. We couldn't explain anything to them or offer comfort. We had turned their lives upside down and there was no quick way to right it again. We just had to keep them safe and be patient. Marvin and Maravik faced a long list of challenges. Not understanding us was probably the biggest at the beginning, closely followed by medical issues. From tuberculosis screening to medicals and vaccinations, a visit to an ENT specialist to diagnose a hearing impairment, an emergency visit to a dentist for an abscessed tooth, 2 hospital stays, 2 general anaesthetics, stitches in a head gash that's resulted from a tantrum, and a broken arm. And that gets me up to about week 12. Even getting to know them wasn't straightforward because they hid their personalities from us and they only smiled when they were playing. This is our first Christmas photo. Getting them to smile was simply impossible. Our only survival tactic was to keep life simple. So they knew what to expect tomorrow and what to expect from us. And we followed the same routine every day. A trip to the park in the morning, then home for lunch, and a swim and a sleep, and then a swim in the afternoon. And bedtime stories after dinner, even if they didn't understand the words. They were very happy to listen, especially if we chose the books carefully. They had to be colourful and preferably told in rhyme. It took 3 or 4 months for them to begin to relax, and only then did the smiles and the laughter light up their eyes. It started with musical productions in the living room and it spread to everyday life. Playing with them when their emotions were disarmed was important to build their confidence and trust in us. It didn't matter whether we were playing games in the park, playing in the pool, or the cubby in the backyard. Simply having fun together helped to form and eventually strengthen the bonds between us. Now, they actually didn't have any concept of family, which isn't surprising after spending a significant portion of their life in an orphanage. I'm not sure they understood their relationship to each other. We had to build relationships around them and a sense of belonging for them to gain the security they needed. So we started with the extended family at birthdays, family weddings, and even some one-on-one time with Grandpa. And I still remember that moment with with Jeff yelling out to Marvin, "Are you ready yet? Are you ready?" as he held the front of that toboggan. They had a great day together. Then as part of the school community, through the choir and the end of year musicals. And finally, to help them feel that they belonged within the broader community as part of sporting teams. As you can imagine, these were all long-term projects. But everything we did was influenced to some degree in the early years by tantrums. Maravik's tantrums lasted for 12 to 18 months, but Marvin's lasted for 3 years before they morphed into episodes of age-inappropriate behaviour that were almost as difficult to manage. New challenges kept appearing and they were all multifaceted, with no easy solutions. Maravik was bullied at school from day one. And when Marvin entered kindergarten the next year, the crew of bullies started on him. It continued in one form or other for many years, negatively impacting their self-confidence, their self-esteem, and their learning. Learning was a serious issue, and for many years we were completely in the dark about their lack of progress. As teachers, we tried to support them in any way we could, from kindergarten to year 12. We hoped that expanding their experiences would help, but we had to wait about 12 months for Marvin to calm enough for us to venture out to places like the zoo, the museum, anywhere that was interesting. Well, actually, it turned out that everywhere was interesting, and they were like sponges, asking questions constantly. Unfortunately, even broadening their general knowledge and their vocabulary didn't help their learning issues. It took us far too long to find the research that had some of the answers, and language was a big part of it. Even then, no one we consulted for help knew anything about their unique language and learning issues or how to help them. The significance of racial difference was one issue that we hadn't thought enough about. The Northern Beaches is a beautiful area to raise children, but it probably is and was the most homogenous Caucasian LGA in the city. Now, there were two facets to this problem: the bullying that happened at school and the consequences of looking different to almost everyone around you. When they were little, they didn't understand that they were racially different, despite it being the cause of most of the bullying. We focused on nationality and encouraging pride in their Filipino heritage, rather than any explanation of racial difference. Definitely a mistake. It was different in their teenage years when they became more aware of physical differences, particularly Maravik, and it was hard for her to appreciate the nature of Asian beauty when she encountered so few Asian faces. She needed reassurance about many aspects of her appearance because she was drawn to the images in magazines of tall, thin Caucasian women. In her mind, they were the standard against which she was being compared. Thankfully, their concerns faded as they were exposed to more racially diverse communities. While they dealt with everything else, they were also trying to work out who they were and to value their own self-worth. For this to happen, they had to understand their early life and find a place for memories of it in the present. It took time for this to happen, and our role has been to ensure that it all came together comfortably as one story. Like most families, there was always a problem of some description to resolve, and the single most important factor in being able to do so was Marvin and Maravik's willingness to talk about whatever was on their minds, both to us and to each other. They are truly remarkable young people, and the bond that they share is very special. I think we won the jackpot when we were allocated siblings. In case you're wondering, they're now happy, reasonably well-adjusted young people. Maravik is an early childhood educator at a local preschool, and Marvin is a paramedic with New South Wales Ambulance. He started yesterday. I just want to finish by saying that our experience is far from perfect, but I think it's fair to describe it as a success. The literature describes a lot of factors that influence successful attachment and integration of a child, and they all primarily relate to the child's age, the time they spent in an institution, and the quality of their environment. However, one that isn't mentioned is, for me, up with the most important, and that is, had they ever been loved? And I know without any doubt that Marvin and Maravik were loved, and that's what allowed us to form a strong attachment within our family. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we'll just stop the screen share now, and we'll have a chat about that. That was a very brief overview. Let me tell you, everyone, there's a lot more detail in the book, and let's just delve into some of the things. First of all, I'd like to know I'd like you to share how you actually came about to get it published in the first place, because it's a very deeply personal story, and you know, not one that you would normally just shop around, I would imagine. So what was your journey to publication?
Marvin and Maravik were the inspiration, to be honest, because I truly believe they are extraordinary young people, and the journey that they took with us was remarkable. Their resilience during the journey was remarkable. And it was that fact alone that made me think that other people deserve to hear about that story. Because at the time, started writing in 2015. And at that time, there were a lot of negative stories in the press. And there was one in particular that really upset me. It was a 60-minute story about adoption auctions in the United States. And the way they go about adoptions in the United States is very different to here. Far less structured, things happen much quicker. And I suppose because of that, they lead to a lot of failures. And then they turn around and they auction the children off. And I just thought, you know, we've been so lucky.
Yeah.
We have these wonderful young people with us, and their story deserves to be told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I started writing.
Nice.
Getting it published was the next step, but I started writing.
Yeah. To share the positive side of adoption rather than
Yes.
the negative. Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, in your journey, you mentioned that you wished you'd thought about the intercountry adoption process and what that would mean for the children coming to this country. What support services were there for you, if any, and what, you know, are you still involved with families that are newly adopting people, or have you kind of moved on from that and you're I guess living your lives now rather than focusing on the adoption process? Or, you know, what does it have any place in your life at the moment?
Oh, look, it always has a place in your life, I think. But the support when we adopted was pitiful.
Mm-hmm.
Made worse by the fact that there are no professionals in Australia, certainly then, and I don't think it's a lot different now, that actually understood the problems for internationally adopted children. It's a completely different story in the United States and in the United Kingdom. And that's where I found the research that led me to a much better understanding of some of the problems that they had. I think it's a shame because I was invited to a seminar last year, just before COVID broke out. And it was to be part of a rethinking of support that should be provided to adoptive families. And there were adoptees, adopted parents, and people from DOCS and the likes in the room. I was astonished that their stories from people much more recently adopting were so similar to ours, that they all had the same questions that weren't being answered.
Wow. So
hopefully as a result of that, the workshop, which was part of a big rethink, there will be improvements, and there are some psychologists that are now clued in. But for example, there are 3 in New South Wales. It's not many to be able to get to if you do have, you know, problems with children.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the amount of money that was allocated to this restructure was a pittance. So, you know, it's maybe lip service. I hope it's more than lip service, but I don't think it's going to provide, you know, the amount of what I would think is appropriate support for adoptive families. Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you still have any connection with the what was it called, White Cross,
yes,
the center?
I'm friends with them on Facebook.
And how are they going at the moment?
Well, they've done it tough through
through
COVID. I probably one of the best things we did was take Marvin and Maravik back to White Cross. We did that. It was exactly 10 years to the day almost. We drove up the driveway again to be met by a sign welcoming the Smiths, which was pretty special. I found it an incredibly emotional day. I was very concerned about the effect it might have on them. And Maravik, it was like a social, just any other social event. About half the staff were the same. And she just ran off with one of the carers that used to be, well, one of her old carers, and went on a tour, and Alan, Marvin and I followed quietly behind. Marvin had no memory of the institution at all, which mystified me because he was almost 5. I don't know. He was a very troubled little boy, and I don't think he had a great time there. So whether he's shutting it out or whatever, but he just kept saying to me, "Mum, this means nothing." They keep saying to me, "Don't you remember this? Don't you remember?" No, nothing. Doesn't mean anything, Mum. So
the resilience or survival technique, perhaps.
I think a survival technique.
Yeah. And you know, you mentioned that you sought help and you found things. Was psychology or child psychologist in that toolkit for you, or was it
yes,
more of research that, you know, you're a capable science teacher? I'm sure you've got a lot of, or had a science background. Yeah,
we did everything. Very early on, Marvin's behaviour is hard to describe. It was so extreme, so violent, our house was being destroyed, and he ran away from home. He was this minute little boy, disappeared.
It's been so frightening.
Don't know how he got out. We had locks on everything. And Alan found him about, I don't know, half a kilometre down. We live on a 6-lane highway. Half a kilometre down the road.
You also have that challenge.
Yeah, he was standing on the median strip in the middle of the road, and Alan saw him. It was at that point that we thought we need professional help.
Yep.
And Marvin was too young to take to the psychologist, so I went. It was useless, absolutely useless. He had no understanding of the issues for an adopted child. And he was telling me to do things like sit him on the naughty stool or in the corner, and, just absolutely pointless.
What was quite evident through the book was you obviously have an immense amount of patience and trust in your instincts, which is fantastic, because one of the stories was when you had gone to was it Luna Park or one of the and that you went with a family that you'd avoided taking a lift from anyone because you knew that there could be challenging behavior, but the fact that you stood firm and supported your child, I think that I just thought, oh gosh, what an amazing trait to have.
To explain that story, it was a very, I had a permanent knot in my stomach for about 5 years, I think, just wondering what Marvin would do next. And this was friends of Marvin from school. They were twins, and I was very friendly with the mother, and so she suggested that we all go together, and I was terrified to do it but agreed. And of course Marvin got upset, and by this stage he was 9, so he wasn't throwing tantrums. He was just doing these age inappropriate things that were bizarre. And so we're at Luna Park in a school holiday. You can imagine how many people are around. And he didn't get to sit with the best friend of the twins on a ride. And for Marvin, those friendships were critical to his understanding of who he was, to his worth. And because he didn't get to sit with the little boy who was his best friend, he just disappeared. He checked out, and he kept hiding around the back of all the rides, and it just got scarier and scarier because he'd disappear and you don't know where he is. Always thought there could be weird people hanging out around the back of Luna Park. So after a while, I tried to get, time usually was a pretty good healer. It didn't work. And so I said to the other mother, look, we're going to have to go home because this isn't going to get any better, and Marvin's at risk with him disappearing. She was really, a good friend. She didn't understand it. She knew the whole story and didn't understand that Marvin's behaviour was just him trying to work himself out. He was he wanted to be with that best friend that was just critical to him. And if that didn't happen, the end of the world was nigh.
Yeah.
And I was so disappointed that she didn't understand that a 9-year-old, who had been from the streets of Manila, could behave, in a way that she had not seen before. She couldn't come to terms with it. She couldn't. And it really upset me a lot that I was with someone who couldn't come with me on that ride, and we all had to leave.
Yeah.
And we remained friends, but it was a bit different.
Yeah. But good on you, because clearly, you've got 2 wonderful now grown people in your life that trust you implicitly because you stood up for them when they needed you most. Like, that is, I've actually got tingles now just even thinking about it. Just, how powerful that must have been for them. Well, having had such a difficult early years.
I think that the relationship we've built with them is really incredible. Love is something I talk briefly about in the book, because I had read a lot of stories and parents saying things like, I loved them even before I met them, or I loved them as soon as I met them. And I just, for me, I couldn't make sense of that. And particularly when our children were almost 5 and 7. So they weren't cuddly little babies that you
Yeah.
could pick up and think, oh, you know, isn't she or he cute? They were horrible. Marvin was he was pretty horrible. And, you know, the thought of saying, you know, that you loved them, it was just false.
Yeah.
Now, we actually did say all the time to them that we loved them. They didn't understand English, though. And it was just something we wanted to get into the habit with them, that we were saying, we love you.
But I guess you had to do more action than telling.
It was all action. It was all action. And it was getting them to trust us. And once they trusted us, you know, then eventually the relationship went two ways. You know, for me, initially it was tough. I felt compassion for them. I felt overwhelmed almost by the responsibility for caring for them with the safety, just so hard to ensure. And we were so busy just trying to survive for that first 6 months particularly, that, you know, the thought of, do I love this child or not, never crossed my mind.
Yeah, you were just
no. And then Marvin
getting through each day.
And then Marvin had to get his tonsils out, another addition to the medical list. And that was about 7 or 8 months after they came.
He did have a phenomenal amount of medical issues, poor child.
Yeah.
Like that was...
Yeah, still going.
Is it?
Hearing aids and whatever.
Oh.
But when he went in and had his tonsils out, so that was about July or August of the first year, and I had to take him into theatre and watch them put a mask over his face, and he's grasping at my hand, and I thought, oh my goodness, I am in hook, line and sinker here. I love this child, you know. And it was only at that moment that I realised what had just overtaken us.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
So it was time, you know.
Time.
Yeah. And how long did it take for the children, for Marvin and Maravik to grasp English, do you think? How long was that?
Oh, well, that's been a journey.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we're science teachers. Thought we could do enough research to work things out, but they were teenagers before I started to understand their situation is completely different. Internationally adopted children like them, being older, not always, but sometimes, they go through a completely different acquisition of language. And we noticed that they lost their language. Marvin stopped speaking Tagalog about 3 months after they arrived, and Maravik a month or two past that. And they went through this language void. And it's because we didn't speak Tagalog that they lost their first language and hadn't gained the second. And then they learn the second a bit more like a baby learns English or learns language. But they didn't have context for learning. They weren't saying, oh, this word in Tagalog, you know, this is an apple in Tagalog and that's an apple in English, sort of thing.
Yeah.
They had nothing to connect. And it leaves them in a really, you know, pretty fragile state. It's, you know, it's not uncommon with older children that come. They get left, and it's very hard to go back and fill. We tried, let me tell you. We tried to fill vocabulary.
What techniques were you trying to use?
Go back to all the basic things with children's books, sort of point, you know, words and word lists, and we use spelling lists to help us build vocabulary. But we went right back to the beginning. I mean, one of the things that we were told at Docs was to take them back through baby toys. And it was actually very valuable. And that helped. Well, we thought it was helping, you know, sort of with language, the discussion about the baby toys. And that never interested in them for long, but they intensely wanted to play with some of these toys that were clearly too young for them. And then they would move on to something a little bit older and a little bit older. So we went, as much as you would teach a 2-year-old the basic words, we tried to do that and failed.
I'm sure you didn't fail completely.
Not completely, but yes. So the big point that we missed was their social language was not too bad by the end of 12 months. We didn't realise that their cognitive language was really, you know, almost didn't exist. And it's cognitive language that you need to learn. And that was fundamentally the problem with their learning.
Oh gosh. And you know, having had your experience with older children, are you called upon by the adoption agencies to share your experience, or you know, is that not a thing?
No, I used to go back quite a while. I mean, I did it for about 3 or so years after we, not immediately. Well, once we had regained,
you were busy.
sanity.
you were dealing with two young children. Right. You're very busy.
Then I did go back to the parenting seminars.
Yeah.
And then when the book was published, Maravik and I went and spoke at one of the parenting seminars, which was lovely. Yeah,
that must have been lovely. And they're obviously, they've overcome some of the challenges that cropped up for them along the way with regard to learning. But in your book, you were saying that Marvin was quite successful.
He was. No matter what we tried, how we tried to teach them to learn, they were better at working it out themselves. Mm-hmm. So Marvin was in year 8 when he worked it out. And he has this unique way of learning, which is very time consuming. Primarily when he was younger, it used to come down to him coming and telling us about the lesson he had that day.
So it was like repetition.
Repetition. He had to speak about it to learn.
Wow.
And I have to say, as a teacher, the one thing you find out when you find out how well you understand a topic is when you try to explain it to your class. Uh-huh. And it's the same principle. He was explaining to us, and that worked really well when he was younger, but it got a bit tricky when he was doing that, the age. Because
you couldn't participate. Well, I mean, I'm sure you were like, tell me more about that thing that I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, we weren't too bad because we were teachers, but yeah, I'll tell you, my writing improved a lot when Marvin was studying for the HSC with his English.
Hence writing a book.
Hence writing a book. That's right. But the sad thing was that Marvin got his act together in year 8, worked it all out. He went up 95 places in the form in that year.
Phenomenal.
And then in year 9, he was, from that moment on, he witnessed an event at school, which was basically a pornographic little society.
Yeah, terrible.
Boys, upskirting with cameras and what have you. It destroyed the 2 teachers that were involved, and Marvin could not stand back and do nothing. His moral compass is extraordinary. So he went and told the principal about it. And his best mate, who was beside him at the time, went and told the boys that Marvin was telling the principal. Marvin was viciously bullied from that moment on, so much so that he just went backwards in his learning, started to pick up again in year 11, and then got bullied brutally again in year 11.
And that is a very unfortunate, I don't want to say a theme throughout the book, but it's so sad that these two young kids, they'd already gone through quite a lot, and then to face bullying, in their place of refuge, I suppose. And how did you overcome each of those stages? You mentioned that you carefully chose schools, and what was your experience there?
Well, the sad thing is, I'm a believer in choose the school right in the first place and stick with it. I think school should be a constant in a child's life, and that was our hope that would be the case. And we chose their first school, primary school, very, very carefully. And it was a small school. There were some Filipino families, some Tongan families, so they weren't going to be the only Northern Beaches.
Filipino.
Yeah. But Northern Beaches is such a white area. But we chose, a suburb of 2 or 3 suburbs away to get some diversity in the school, and we thought we'd done well. And, the racial bullying was just, it was continuous. Particularly Maravik got the worst of it, I think. And no matter what we did, we spoke to the school. I was constantly on the phone with the school. And they, public schools have a set procedure to follow, and they all tick the boxes and go through the procedures. And none of it worked. And, I kept going back to the principal. In the end, he said to me, look, I can punish the children. I can't punish the parents.
Okay.
And, so these kids were going home and being reinforced with their opinions. So we took them out of that first school and put them in a small school at Bayview that was...
But were the kids, you chosen it carefully from a diversity perspective. What about the other kids that were they being
I don't know.
Persecuted as just as much? Or?
Not as much, no.
Wow.
So I don't really understand that. But the thing that was amazing, and we took them to the second school, which didn't have another racial, and there was no racial diversity, nothing. But it was a different socioeconomic group, and they weren't bullied at all. So it said a lot to me. It said a lot.
And what do you think the schools, aside from the socioeconomic thing, is it a matter of kids repeating what they're hearing at home, or
yes.
could more have been done in your opinion?
Well, some schools seem better able to do more, because when Maravik went to high school, we put her in a local Catholic school because the children, Maravik was baptised a Catholic in Manila, and what we wanted to try and maintain that faith. And on the outside, it looked like it was going to support her learning needs. It looked perfect. She was brutally bullied there. And I said at the end of year 7, look, I think we should move you. And she said, no, I don't want to give up. Let's try another year.
Good on her. To have that.
But it got worse.
Strength and resilience.
Yeah. And the school goes through all the procedures, and then they have this reconciliation meeting at the end. And of course, the bullies say, yes, we won't do it again. No, won't do that again, until they're out in the playground and it happens again. But the interesting thing is, so we did move her for year 9 and took her up to another Catholic school, but a Catholic girls' school and a private school. And perfect, no problem. There were some Asian faces there as well, which was great. And the first year went by beautifully. And then one of the bullies from the previous school enrolled in that school in the following year and started bullying Maravik on the first day. The difference was that little girl got dragged out of class. Maravik rang me. I rang the school. And that child was taken out of class on that first day and told exactly what her place in the school would be, that is, out of the school, if she continued in that way. They resolved it in a day.
So just nipped it in the bud straight away, no messing around.
Nothing. Yep. She just stayed away from that girl and there were no problems whatsoever.
I find, I only have a young kid, but it just breaks my heart because kids can be so mean.
Unfortunately, bullying in schools, bullying is in every school.
Yes, absolutely.
And unfortunately, it's part of human nature. And I do think some of the programs that have been introduced, which are about teaching the witnesses to stand up, are as important as teaching children to be resilient and trying to teach bullies, the error of their ways. But if there are strong people around that witness these events
and don't say anything,
well, it's useless if they don't say anything. I mean, it just empowers bullies. So, having more, having children around that are willing to speak up is a huge benefit to the victims of bullying. But it's very much dependent on the staff at the school as to whether it works.
Yeah. So, one of the wonderful things that came out through your story was the support you had from your family, which was really lovely, and you had your mum. So your Maravik and Marvin used to kind of have a bit of respite, I suppose.
That's right. So
when they'd had enough of you and Alan, they went downstairs and hung out with
Grandma and her lolly jar.
Do they still have sweet tooth, Marvin and Maravik?
A bit. Not Marvin was terrible, but he's a gym boy these days, and thinking about what he looks like, so he's not so bad. But he did it tough without lollies because the orphanage had bribed him with lollies.
Okay.
You know, the first day we met him, they had given him a bag of, you know, those family-sized packs of lollies that you see in the supermarket. He was riding a scooter around the orphanage holding one of those big packets of lollies, just eating one after the other. And they clearly had been bribing him just to be
Calm down.
So no, he
was
has
that
got
was that some was that some of the source of the tantrums, the sugar?
No, he was just scared. He was just scared. Definitely just scared. Didn't understand what was going on.
And couldn't articulate what was going on for him.
Well, he did articulate it. That was
his way of doing it.
I included a few of Marvin's quite philosophic statements from over the years, but he used to upset me because when he had a tantrum or did something silly, he would just look me in the eye and say, "Take me back to Whitecross and get another boy." And, you know, then it changed, you know, sort of within a year or two, it changed to, "I'm not good enough to be your son. Take me back and choose another one." And that notion that he thought he was tradable, it was just emotionally punishing at the time, I can tell you.
Yeah.
But when he was 7, he said to me after a tantrum, he always spoke to us after a tantrum and still does, you know, when he gets a bit frazzled, he still comes and talks to us. But when he was 7, he came to me after one tantrum and he said, "Mum, I'm 7. And when I'm 8, I won't be as angry. And when I'm 9, I won't be as angry. And when I'm 10, I won't be angry anymore." So he knew that his behaviour was inappropriate. He just couldn't do anything about it. And it was hilarious because when he turned 10, or a day or two later, he had a hissy fit and he just stopped dead and he said, "It's all right. I'm not really angry. I won't be angry anymore. I'll get over it. And when I'm 11, I won't have these turns anymore." So even, you know, 3 or 4 years down the track, he still had that idea in his mind that he had to fix his behaviour and he was just working out how to do it and it would slowly go away, and it did.
So I'm sure he has these big, strong emotions still. We all do. And what does he do now to...
Comes and talks to us.
Yeah.
Still, he does. Most nights, and often after I'm dozing off, he will come in. "Got a moment, Mum? Can we talk for a minute?" Sure.
How nice. How nice that he comes to you like that. And so you mentioned in your beginning that you thought that Marvin and Marvick initially didn't actually understand that they were brother and sister.
No.
How you know, they've got a special bond now, but when did that change? When did they learn that they were siblings? I mean, even I'm sure even adoptive children who speak the same language as their adoptive parents probably have that same challenge as well. But when did you see it shift? When
their bond it's funny because they were in different dormitories in the orphanage, so they actually didn't see very much of each other. And although the orphanage tried to portray to us, you know, they're the sibling, it's special, they're the sibling pair, and you know, we've been nurturing them as a sibling pair. A lot of what the orphanage told us simply wasn't true. And Marvin doesn't remember any of it, so it's not, you know, surprising really for him. But Maravik does remember these things, and she said, "You know, I hardly saw him. I didn't, I really didn't know that we were related in that way. But there was a connection between them. They didn't understand what the connection was.
Yeah,
there was a connection. So, I mean, Marvin was only 14 months old when they were surrendered, and Maravik was 3.5. And she'd been looking after him. So the connection they had was a deep emotional connection, but not one that really they understood the terms brother and sister. Mum and dad, they didn't know anything about the relationships of a family or the meaning of that. And then as time went on here, that emotional bond, I think, got stronger because they were there to protect each other.
Yeah.
They really, particularly with food, because they'd lived on the streets of Manila for a while.
I know, it's such a funny story. Do tell this one.
So my niece had taken Maravik out to the shops, and Marvin had said to me, so this is early on, so no real English, paddle pop, ice cream, as he said. And so I gave him a chocolate paddle pop, and he said, Maribek, I want one for Maribek. I said, I can't give you one for Maribek because she's at the shops. I'll give her, and I tried to assure him that I would give her one later. And I did. But that night, when I was reading a story to him, I put my hand under the pillow and it was wet. I thought, what's going on here? And I lifted up, turned the light on, and there was a melted paddle pop. So he had snuck one out of the freezer, put it in his pillow slip to hide it for Maribek, and then forgotten to give it to her. But they always, if you ever gave them food, they would say one for Maribek, one for Marvin. Even with sporting events when they were, 10, 12, they always give out a bag of snakes or something at the end of a match. And Maribek would always say, I'll take one to Marvin. And then she'd put it in her pocket, carry it home and hand it over. That continued for a very long time. Very caring.
So how did Maribek and Marvin feel about you writing their story?
Very positive.
Sharing it with everyone.
Very positive.
Yeah.
So I would write during the day, and when they came home from school each day, they'd say, could you read out what you've written today? And then they'd just roll around on the carpet beside me laughing at the stories, sort of. That was one part of it. So very much on board as I was writing. But when it came to publish, I said to them, I'm not publishing unless you're happy with me doing this, I gave them each a copy. So I want you to read it. If I want me to take anything out, I'll take it out. And so they both read it. And no, we want to help. They wanted to help other families who were in the same position as them, because they thought the things that we'd all learnt together would be helpful to other people. And they've remained very positive about it. In the library tours that I started doing before COVID hit, Maribek attended with me, everyone actually, well, all but no, every one of them. And so she really enjoyed, she spoke briefly as she answered questions. She enjoyed the experience, and I think she's proud of the story, to be honest.
Yeah. And do they have, do you think they have plans to ever go and spend any time in the Philippines, or is that just a foreign country to them completely?
They don't talk about it. We've always just, their life in the Philippines is just part of our story. Yeah. So when they were younger, we just talked about it as part of the story of our family. We just talk about adoption as part of our life and them coming into our life. So any story, any questions they've ever had have always just come to the surface. And taking them back to the Philippines, it was quite an eye-opener for them, because Manila's a pretty confronting city. And I think they were very surprised at that collision between first and third world. Yep. Living on the northern beaches of Sydney, you're pretty protected. Yeah. And then you go somewhere like that where there are literally derelict, I don't know, houses or lean-to beside mansions.
Almost shanties, yeah.
Yeah, and they're just beside, the most exclusive looking mansions and gated areas of the city. It's quite bizarre how it entwines.
And the traffic.
And the traffic, yeah.
It's terrible.
Well, it is. But they were very struck by the poverty that was there. And
perhaps it was a memory that they probably weren't aware they have.
No, I mean, the memories are interesting because they coped better with the Philippines than I imagined they would. But when they were younger, we went to Fiji. We let them choose where we went to. And our first overseas trip was to Fiji. And we took a bus trip into Nandi one day. And Marvin, I'm not sure, I think he was about 10. And Nandi's a pretty confronting city as well. None of the high rise, but the poverty is in your face. And the smells, and it was really hot the day we were there. It was, really almost hard to breathe. And you sort of went into the air-conditioned shops to just get a breath of air. But Marvin only lasted about half an hour before he became very disturbed by what he was seeing. And I think it was what he was smelling, because the smells on the street of Nandi were overpowering. And he just sidled up beside me and said, Mum, we have to go back to the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want to talk about it, didn't ever talk about it. One of the few things I don't think he wanted to talk about it because I don't think he understood what was happening. And I think it was a sensory memory. It was the memory of the smell from when he was a baby on the streets of Manila. And he just knew that that was an uncomfortable place. That wasn't a safe place, and he just didn't want to be there.
Oh, yeah, that must have been quite visceral, I suppose. Smells.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, they've had, memories. I mean, obviously, Maravic's memories are quite vivid, but Marvin's memories are much more that sort of elusive scene or a smell or something, that disturbs him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so did you want to tell people how they can get their hands on a copy of this book?
Yes. I have a Facebook author page.
I think we'll share a...
Is my photo still up there? Oh, I was going to show you the photo. Is the photo still there?
You can hang on, let me let you share. There you go. You should be able to share again.
This is a few of the Christmas photos that we took over. We took a photo every Christmas to track our family progress, and I put them together as a collage a couple of years ago, sort of to track the very unhappy little faces in that centre photo to the much more grown young people up at the top. The ways people can contact me, I have an Anne Hutchison 246 Gmail account, and also Facebook, Anne Hutchison.
We're not seeing any. Are you sharing yet? Did you want to share that presentation? Sorry, I turned it off, and then you should be able to share it again.
There we go. So you didn't see that photo?
No, go back one.
So this is the collection of Christmas photos.
Sweet to see them growing.
That's right.
No weird Santa in there.
No. And then two possible ways to contact me, either to have a chat or I can mail you a copy of the book and inscribe it if you would like me to do that.
We do have a copy or two at the library now that we're able to do click and collect. That's a new thing, and that we've just released. People will be able to click and collect at the library soon. So who is there any lasting message, or last message I should say, that you would like to leave
well, it's sort of
with the audience today?
What a wonderful privilege it's been to have that opportunity to adopt Marvin and Maravik. It's really an extraordinary way to become a parent, and quite a privilege. I do worry sometimes it's talked about, almost a throwaway manner in the media with the celebrities. They seem to be able to pick up children at the drop of a hat. I don't think it portrays the hard journey that you spend together, but it is an extraordinary way to become a parent. And if anyone listening is interested in adopting or, considering adoption, I think my advice to you is, if it's an international adoption, to learn the language, to be patient, and to keep in your mind, think about their side of this story. Try to put yourself into their place.
Yeah, very important. The if anyone has any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A, or if you've got any comments you'd like to share with Anne, again, we will share those with Anne afterwards. There's one beautiful message, Anne. I'll read it out for you. Many thanks, Anne, for your grace and work well done. A moving presentation. Many would benefit, I would imagine. So thank you for that, whoever you are. It was sent in anonymously. Thank you. And yeah, so tell us about what's happening right now. So you've got the writing bug.
I have got the writing bug, and COVID helped a lot. So I lost my father when I was a teenager, and I always thought his story was quite remarkable. My parents are Scottish, and then my mother lived to a ripe old age, and she spent a lot of her life telling me her stories, or their stories over the years, because she lived in the bottom of our big family home and we were upstairs. And so after publishing The Gift of Adoption, I thought I would write their story. So that's in with the publisher now and hopefully out by Christmas. And I hope to do...
Is there a title yet, or is that still...
Yeah, no, the title is No Ordinary Life.
No Ordinary Life by Anne Hutchison?
It is,
yep.
It is. But I hope to do some talks, because the thing I enjoy, not only reliving my parents' lives, and I have to say getting to know them a little bit better, which is kind of weird, but I've thoroughly enjoyed the research process, and it's just like one big puzzle that you're putting together. I'm truly amazed by the power of the internet, that I can sit in my little writing nook and get in contact with people all over the world and make very meaningful contact with them, as well as the research, the power of research, to be able to describe a day in history right down to the temperature, the phase of the moon, you know, that you could look things up like this and then be able to describe the scene accurately of what the soldiers on the beach at Dunkirk were experiencing. It's just mind-blowing.
So a very different experience than this one then.
It is.
so we could say this is almost like a therapy, like a cathartic exercise, and your current book is more about an investigation, a learning about your past, I guess, or your ancestry.
That's right. I learned more about my parents than I thought possible.
Was there anything, I mean, I don't want to share too much, but you know, don't reveal anything, but is there anything that was remarkably surprising for you, or
in some ways
don't tell us. We don't want to
not so much the story. It's not so much the story. The remarkable thing for me was because my father didn't speak of his experience in the military, like many men don't. And so we had very fractured bits and pieces of his story. So to help tell his story, I found the story of others in war diaries. And the thing that was amazing was that I was able to contact their living relatives to get permission to include some of their stories.
Amazing.
And that just blew me away, what you're able to do these days and track down people. And I'm an absolute amateur at doing this. So it's great. It was really
well, no, you write beautifully, and if anyone does have the pleasure of reading this book, it's a story of as you described it in the beginning, of learning to build a relationship and give a sense of belonging, and what's involved with that, and all the practicalities of the medical and the dealing with docs and facts and all of the other organizations that have to...
For you, imagine this: these two children, 5 and 7, had never used a toothbrush.
What? No wonder they had terrible teeth. Poor things. Their
teeth were terrible. That's right.
Oh dear.
And they have beautiful teeth now.
Thanks to you, thanks to your support, because the lolly bribing we were
very concerned that the second teeth would be affected, but they weren't.
That is good. You got to them just in time, I reckon.
We did, I think, yes.
Meant to be. So thank you for sharing your beautiful story.
Thank you.
And being here with us tonight. I think Sandy has put up a little message. We are recording this, so if you enjoyed it, please, we will send you a link once it's ready up on YouTube. Please do share it widely and help Anne tell her story and share it to those who need it, because sometimes you don't know what's involved. I certainly didn't know the nuts and bolts of what would happen in adoption. You think, oh, you'll get a kid and then you learn to deal with it, but you know, you were plunged into parenthood.
Well, I think it's actually an important story for teachers and health professionals.
Yes, actually, they could learn a thing or two, especially around the bullying thing, because that was so profound. Anyway, we must end here. The time has come up. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for your attention.